Recently, governments and individuals have released video of some very unusual UFOs, including some in the shape of spheres, disks, and tic-tacs. Now, if we believe the hypothesis that some UFOs are actually alien in origin and have been observing the human race for centuries, we would expect to see these UFO shapes earlier in our history. Today, I'll share 4 vintage Polish UFO cases where the UFO shapes and behavior mimic those that have been revealed in the last few years. Hi, I'm MF Thomas, and this is My Dark Path. War has always been a theater of the extraordinary, but amidst the chaos of World War II, strange phenomena occasionally broke out through the carnage, astonishing even battle-hardened witnesses. These wartime accounts from Poland have been mostly lost in the folds of history, but still each seems shockingly modern when we grapple to understand the spheres and tic-tacs that have been seen in our skies and oceans of late. Last year, I traveled to Poland to research that country's famous and little-known UFO cases. This episode will cover a few of the fascinating incidents that have much less notoriety. Be sure to watch my episodes on the Gdynia incident, which is Poland's Roswell, and the Emelson incident. If you've been baffled by the odd behavior and shape of the spheres that have tracked our planes, you'll find this first case from 1943 unsatisfyingly familiar. The spring day of April 9th, 1943 was unseasonably warm in Warsaw. Despite the beautiful weather, the air was heavy with the dread that had blanketed the city under Nazi occupation. The Warsaw Ghetto smoldered. The occupation would culminate in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising that would erupt days later on April 19th as a Jewish resistance movement against the Nazi forces that were attempting to deport the remaining inhabitants of the Warsaw Ghetto to extermination camps. For 18-year-old Kazimierz Bazowski, a scout in the underground resistance, this day would mark the beginning of his lifetime's pursuit of the unknown. Virtually everyone in the city had some role in resisting the Nazi occupation. Bazowski and 2 companions had been assigned to monitor German troop movements near Bonifraterska Street. Bazowski was performing his duties, noting Nazi troop positions and movements when something unexpected caught his attention. A strange object emerged from the hazy sky above the ghetto. Initially, it appeared as a mere speck in the distance, but its distinct features became apparent as it flew closer. The object was clearly spherical, seemingly metallic, and its surface shimmered with 2 interwoven colors, a rich raspberry hue and a deep bluish green. The colors shifted and blended as the sphere approached their position. It wasn't like anything we'd ever seen, Bazowski would later write. The sphere ascended and descended repeatedly, its speed reminiscent of a German Feisler Storch reconnaissance aircraft, a relatively slow 100 miles per hour. Bazowski and his companions estimated the object to be approximately 25 feet in diameter, flying at an altitude of about 200 feet. It seemed to defy all logic and understanding. And as the sphere moved closer to the area, something remarkable happened. The German soldiers stationed along Bonifraterska Street, tasked with shooting anyone attempting to escape, suddenly stopped their grim work almost in unison. Their attention turned upward, experiencing the same astonishment and unease that Bazowski and his companions felt. The ethereal yet tangible object floated down the war-torn street above their positions, clearly visible to all. Then the German soldiers opened fire. Dozens of rifles erupted, bullets tearing through the air in a barrage aimed at the sphere. Bazowski, watching intently, saw that the bullets had no effect on the sphere. It neither wavered nor reacted, merely continued flying serenely amidst the chaos. The firing continued, and the roar of gunfire echoed through the ruined streets of Warsaw. Civilians hiding nearby must have watched in equal bewilderment, wondering what could warrant such an aggressive response from the German forces. The sphere, though, continued its surveillance without reaction. And then suddenly the sphere shifted course. It glided away from the street, headed toward the old town. The soldiers hesitated, their weapons falling silent as the object stopped midair. Then, in a burst of movement so swift that it left all the onlookers stunned, the sphere shot off into the sky at an impossible speed. And within moments it was gone. For Bzowski, this encounter transformed his life. The sphere, with its unearthly colors and imperviousness to bullets, was unlike anything that he would witness during the war, even amidst its terrible depravity. Decades later, as a ufologist, Bzowski noted this event proved to be the genesis of his fascination with the unexplained. His latter controversial yet thought-provoking work revolved around the idea that the Earth itself might play a role in these phenomena. Working with the engineer Miloslav Wilk, he developed a theory of energetic stitches in the planet's subtle energy web. These were weak points that allowed anomalous objects to manifest themselves to humans. Whether this theory held any truth remains a matter of debate, but for Bzowski, it was a way to make sense of that fateful day in 1943. Bzowski's encounter with the unexplained sphere, a true UFO, is just as unnerving as the unexplained spheres that move seamlessly between ocean and sky in today's modern world. What do you think these spheres are? Some of these Polish wartime UFO cases are not limited to sightings only, but include actual encounters of the third kind. The story of the Novena alien encounter unfolded in 1943 in the small Polish village in the Chelm area near the modern border with Ukraine. Even today, the quiet rhythm of rural life hides the extraordinary event that took place on a single night over 80 years ago. Two Polish UFO researchers, Piechota and Ryspecki, uncovered this incident decades later in 1987, bringing it into the public view when they interviewed the sole surviving witness. This man had only been 16 during the encounter, and here's the story he shared. After a day of labor in the fields, the witness and 3 other men had been sitting outside a hut talking. The ages of the other 4 were not disclosed, but they must have been either too old or too young for military service. The event started when the men saw a light glowing softly, penetrating the thick canvas of the night. The light originated from a field about 110 yards away from where the hut was and where he and the 4 others sat. Perhaps braver and more curious than the rest, the witness and 1 other man decided to investigate. Armed only with lanterns, they made their way across the field. As they drew close, they came upon a large object resting in the field. Its appearance defied anything that they had experienced or heard of. The object resembled a hat set on a wide bollard, a bollard being a round base. The cabin of the craft rested atop this cylindrical base. It was obviously mechanical and it pulsed with an unusual brightness. The cabin featured a row of windows that glinted in the moonlight, and the cylindrical base bore a sliding door from which a small ladder extended to the ground. In total, the craft stood approximately 11 feet tall and had a width of about 13 feet. For a moment, the 2 men merely stared, their lanterns casting trembling beams on this object. Then, nearby movement startled them, and emerging from the shadows as though they had been temporarily away from their craft, a group of beings approached, 8 or 9 in total. Each stood about 4.5 feet tall, and these aliens, later dubbed the Novena humanoids, did resemble humans in some ways. They roughly appeared like our idea of a gray alien, but their skin carried a pinkish hue when seen under the lights of the craft and the lanterns. But what was most unsettling to the 2 humans were the aliens' smiles. When they grinned, the corners of their mouths arced upward into an eerie half-moon shape. The Novena humanoids wore headgear that was strapped under their chins, and they had simple 2-piece outfits that seemed tailored to their small forms. Their movements were deliberate, almost hypnotic, and their voices a shrill, rapid-fire language reminded the men of what they thought Japanese might sound like. Seeing the two men, the aliens approached them, clearly speaking to them. Though their words were incomprehensible, their tone and gestures conveyed their intent. They wanted the two men to enter the craft. The witnesses, however, were in a state of shock. They shook their heads vigorously, backing away while raising their hands in refusal. The aliens, though, pressed on, their gestures becoming more insistent. The standoff continued until finally one of the aliens, seemingly frustrated, raised its hand and made a sharp, sweeping motion, and instantly an invisible force struck the men, sending them tumbling to the ground as if pushed by a powerful gust of wind. The witness recalled the sensation vividly. It wasn't pain, but a force that overpowered them. For whatever reason, the aliens gave up their request for the human witnesses to join them aboard the craft, and dazed from the assault, the two humans watched the aliens ascend the ladder and enter the craft. The door closed, and the ship came alive. First, a loud hiss cut through the night, followed by a low vibration that reverberated through the ground with a deafening buzz. Then the craft lifted effortlessly, ascending vertically and vanishing into the star-strewn sky. When the witness and his companion returned to the hut, they found their companions huddled together, wide-eyed with terror. Though they hadn't seen the aliens or the spacecraft, they had witnessed the strange glow and heard the cacophony of sounds that had accompanied the ship's departure. The group talked through the experience for the rest of the night, though the event seemed beyond their ability to process. Years later, when the surviving witness recounted his story, the events of that evening were still like a dream to him. Did the aliens come to study, to invite, or to warn? And why had they chosen this tiny village in eastern Poland amid all the chaos of World War II? The skies over Europe were rarely quiet during World War II. They echoed with the roar of engines, the whistling descent of bombs, and the rattle of machine guns. Yet, strange luminous phenomenon known as Foo Fighters bewildered witnesses. These mysterious lights, spherical and displaying behavior suggestive of intelligent control, became a persistent element of wartime. And among the most intriguing accounts of Foo Fighters comes this one from Poland. Initially, the Allied command speculated that these lights, or Foo Fighters, might be secret German weapons, perhaps some revolutionary form of aerial defense. However, this theory waned as reports consistently described no aggression from these orbs, only their peculiar movements that appeared to be monitoring human activity. One of the earliest Polish accounts of Foo Fighters occurred in September of 1941 aboard the SS Pulaski, a Polish transport vessel navigating the Indian Ocean. The ship was tasked with transporting British soldiers. One evening, the sudden appearance of a sphere maneuvering above their ship alarmed two Polish crew members. The orb hovered, darted, and changed direction with a grace and speed impossible for any known aircraft. The two crew members described it as, quote, a strange globe glowing with a greenish light, about half the size of the full moon as it appeared to us, end quote. A British officer also watched the movements of the sphere with them for over an hour. The sighting, while extraordinary, was only the beginning of Poland's Foo Fighter experience. One of the most compelling Polish accounts came from a daylight sighting during the Warsaw Uprising in mid-August 1944. Amid the carnage and chaos of the battle for Poland's capital, Zenon Sergis, a civilian caught in the crossfire, experienced a moment of quiet amid the turmoil. Standing under a clear sky around 11 a.m., he gazed upward, appreciating the rare peace. A German bomber flying overhead drew his attention, but immediately he observed three small objects flying below the bomber. They caught the sunlight, reflecting it brilliantly. At first, Zenon dismissed them as debris or a secondary aircraft, but as the bomber roared away, these objects descended rapidly. Their altitude dropped so low that they disappeared behind nearby buildings, and moments later they reappeared ascending at an angle before vanishing into the sky. Zenon was left stunned. The objects he reported resembled, quote, flattened spheres, smaller than the airplane and resembling something between a lens and a coin, end quote. They also maneuvered in formation, moving in ways that defied any aircraft that he had ever seen. And what surprised Zenon the most was the object's behavior. They seemed to mimic the playful, elusive patterns of the Foo Fighters reported by Allied pilots, curious but non-aggressive, as if observing the world below for purposes unknown. The mysterious elegance of these unknown entities overshadowed the bomber, a harbinger of destruction. Foo Fighter sightings were not confined to Warsaw. Throughout the war, other Polish cities bore witness to similar phenomena. In 1942, residents of Warsaw reported glowing orbs moving silently through the night sky, their orange and red hues standing out against the darkened cityscape. And in 1944, just months before Zenon's encounter, a farmer claimed to see a fleet of glowing discs flying low over his fields. And in 1945, near Ostrowzow, soldiers saw a formation of lights following a retreating column of German trucks. The soldiers described the movement of these discs as playful rather than threatening. And in the years following the war, Polish ufologists, including Andrzej Trepka, diligently collected these accounts, attempting to piece together the puzzle of the Foo Fighters. And to this day, Zenon's encounter during the Warsaw Uprising is one of the most detailed and vivid. What do you know about the origin of the term Foo Fighter? You might be interested in our video on the subject, found here. During the summer of 1944, as war raged across Europe, 3 men were drawn to observe the battle for Wiklopol-Zerneski, approximately 9 miles away from their home village of Zudek. K. Marcus, his brother and their father, a seasoned veteran of World War I and the Polish Bolshevik War, scaled a nearby hill to watch. And to their surprise, the battle was relatively subdued that day, the usual cacophony of gunfire and explosions reduced to sporadic exchanges. And with little action to observe, they decided to return home, the fading light of evening casting long shadows over the valley. It was then, as the sun dipped behind the hills, that something extraordinary appeared. A strange and fiery object emerged, commanding the attention of the small family. Marcus described it as a brick-red disc, its color intense but oddly muted, lacking the radiant glow of fire. The object's diameter appeared to be roughly half the size of the full moon from their position, and it hovered at an altitude of about 600 or 800 feet, its movement steady and hypnotic. Later, Marcus wrote a letter to a magazine and described what he saw. The object or disc rotated as it glided horizontally from south to north. Its motion was so precise that each revolution lasted about 2 seconds, and its eerie, deliberate flight stood out against the serene evening sky, captivating the 3 family members. The valley that stretched nearly 5 miles across provided a clear view of the phenomenon, and in just about 20 seconds the object traversed the entire expanse, maintaining its unwavering path above the hilltops. The speed, size, and unique motion of the disc defied any explanation that the family could offer. The boys turned to their father for insight. With decades of military experience, he had witnessed countless artillery flares, tracer rounds, and explosives, yet even he seemed perplexed. Quote, "It might have been an artillery flare," he mused, "but such a thing, flying horizontally, it's impossible," end quote. The fiery disc soon disappeared beyond the northern hills, leaving behind a silence as profound as its presence. And for the Marcus family, this brief encounter with the unexplained became a lasting memory, an enduring question against the backdrop of a world at war. While many of these sightings remain anecdotal and secondhand, their consistency and detail align with the broader pattern of wartime and modern UFO encounters. they defy easy explanation. So as the tales of Novena and others fade into obscurity, they leave behind more questions than answers. Yet, for those who lived through them, they were a moment when the ordinary world cracked open, offering a fleeting glimpse into something far more mysterious than they ever could have expected. If you're watching on YouTube, you can catch up on my other episodes about the Gdynia UFO crash and the discovery of an alien survivor. You can also watch the episode about the Emelson incident, where a farmer was brought aboard a UFO. Just follow the links on the screen. And if you like My Dark Path, I think you'll also enjoy reading my novels. They're available on Amazon and any online bookseller. I'm MF Thomas. Thank you for joining me in this episode of My Dark Path, and thank you for walking the dark paths of the world with me. Until next time, my friends, good night.